Hello, greetings Facebook. Okay, I don't need to pin anything on there. Not right. So I am live. I'm live on both platforms. So good afternoon, good evening, ladies, gentlemen. Those of you that are joining me from wherever you are on the planet. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining me today. My name is June Allen. If you don't know me, from JuneAllen.net, and I teach Black women how to heal from the impact of racism with racial sobriety and personal empowerment. So today's topic is all about grief, not just any type of grief, but racial grief as it relates to living under the system of racism. What does it actually mean to be a black person, a black woman, living under the system of racism, having to deal with all of the constant struggles and challenges that we have to deal with? You know, how do we grieve a lot of that stuff? If we grieve it at all, are we even aware that we're grieving? You know, so today I wanted to jump on and have a conversation about it. Hi, thanks for joining. But before I get into the content, I'm going to go through some housekeeping. So let's have a look. So housekeeping number one is that this Saturday, the 6th of July, at 9:30, we're going to be doing it's the book club. Bell Hooks Book Club. We're going to be studying this book, Bell Hooks, Sisters of the Yam. Fantastic book, absolutely love it. And we are going to be studying chapter 7, which is actually all about loss, hence the conversation today about grief. It's all about loss, loss under the system of racism. Really powerful chapter. Got so much out of it, but you know, a very necessary conversation that needs to be had around it. So you don't need to have read the whole book in order to come to the session, because what we do in the session, or what I do in the session, is we read the chapter itself in the session, and then we share on it, we discuss it, and I pull questions and stuff out of the chapter for you to be able to continue the process at home after the session. So, you know, not only do you get an opportunity to kind of look at your own grief and look at your own, you know, how it's impacted you, not just personally, if you've had actual, you know, bereavement and stuff in your family, but also the type of grief processes that you're going through, how you deal with the grief of the losses that you've experienced as a black person, which I'm going to be going into a lot more detail today. So, so the Bell Hooks Book Club is on Saturday. It's 5 minutes from Bond Street Tube if you live in London. If you don't live in London, there's also going to be online options also available. So you can, you can join us from the comfort of your living room in your pajamas if you even want to. So if you click the link in the bio, go to heal.juneallen.net. That's heal.juneallen.net. That's heal.juneallen.net. You can get your tickets there for the Sacred Sister Book Club. So the second thing on the list is that Faith Agugu, my business partner, and myself are going to be doing a retreat, a racial wellness retreat in Ghana this November. And that's all going to be based around the whole topic of around return to self, returning to the divinity, the divine blackalicious person that you are. So, it's going to be, I think it's 5 days in Ghana. So I'm really excited about it being in Ghana, being able to do all of this really deep, powerful work on the shores of the motherland is going to be pretty amazing. And it's also coming in the alignment around the Ghanaian government as well. The Ghanaian government have got a process at the moment where they're asking all of the African diaspora to come home, because it's 400 years since our ancestors were taken from the shores of Africa. So they want to honour that anniversary by encouraging people from the African diaspora to come home. So I think it's really powerful and interesting that Faith and I decided, we didn't know this was going on at the time, that there's been that sort of alignment around us doing the retreat, and then obviously this thing around Ghana, and it's called Year of the Return. So really excited about that. So if you're excited and interested in joining us in Ghana in November, then you can click the link in the bio and you can sign up. You also get some trainings and stuff like that in the meantime. With Faith, and if you've not worked with Faith or I before, there's 3 video trainings what you can access in the meantime. There's one on mindfulness, one on black relationships, and another one on did your black mother betray you? So there's some really interesting stuff there for you to look at. And also we've done a couple more as well, because she came over last month to do the official launch for the Ghana trip. So there's more stuff in there as well around deprivation and abundance and all of that kind of stuff. So really great stuff. So click the link in the bio if you're interested in coming to Ghana with this. So the third piece of housekeeping is my new course, Self-Love Rehab. Self-Love Rehab is something that came out of people not knowing where to start, sisters not knowing where to start their journey. They liked what the type of stuff that I'm talking about. They resonated with what I talk about. They understand that they, maybe they don't love themselves, or they don't have very good self-esteem, and they wanted an opportunity. They wanted a step-by-step process. A step-by-step process. When to do stuff, why it needs to be done, how to do it, when to do it, why it's important, all of that kind of stuff. To give people an opportunity to just have some hand-holding around this stuff and to understand their emotions. There's so much going on. When you first start doing this work, there's so much stuff going on that there does need to be a process. There needs to be a process. And I realised that I didn't really have anything that was like a beginner's course to be able to just walk people through how to get started and all of that. So that is launching. Self-Love Rehab is going to be launched on the Friday the 12th of July. It's for 12 weeks. But there's 6 modules. I think there's 6. I'm not going 5 or 6. 6 modules. And so you get one new module. Well, it's actually not one new module every week, because it depends. Because anyway, there's 6 modules, and we're going to work together. There's going to be soul sessions, group coaching, all of that kind of stuff. And it's going to be really powerful. You're going to get an opportunity to set some wellness goals as well. There's a 90-day empowerment system, which the goals are included in that. And I'm just really excited. I'm really, really excited about being able to launch this, because I know that people are going to get started on their journey. They're going to really begin to understand themselves. They're going to be held. There's going to be a community of other women that are going to be doing the same work as well. So I'm just really excited. I'm really excited to be launching that. So if you're interested in joining us for Self-Love Rehab, the 12-week online course, go to click the link in the bio, go to heal.juneallen.net. That's heal.juneallen.net. That's heal.juneallen.net. So whether you're getting started, you want to get started, or maybe you've already started your journey and you need to refresh it to understand the whole context around racial sobriety and your cultural healing and all that kind of stuff, is for you. So anyway, click the link in the bio if you're interested in that. So for those of you that have just joined, whether you're watching me on the replay or if they've just joined live, my name is June Allen from JuneAllen.net, and I teach Black women how to heal from the impact of racism with racial sobriety and personal empowerment. So 3 things that I'd like you to do if you on this broadcast. If there's something that you don't understand that I talk about, maybe I'm talking in too much jargon or whatever, and you don't understand what I'm saying, drop a link in the comments and let me know. If you don't feel confident to drop a link in the comments, because I understand this is a public platform. Oh, I've got an itch today. Oh, I understand that this is a public platform. Sorry about that. Then drop me a direct message. Drop me a direct message and I will answer your questions from there. The second thing is, if you know somebody that's struggling with grief, that's struggling with all of this stuff, send them a direct message, share it with them. Don't tag them, because maybe they don't want their business shared on social media, but you can just copy the link and send them the link, and because I'm going to be showing some stuff in here that I think will be really helpful to a lot of people. So if you know someone that's struggling with it, then share it with them. The third thing is, if there's stuff that I'm sharing with you that resonates, you've had an aha moment, an insight, or whatever that really resonated with you, then again, drop it in the comments or send me a direct message, because it's important for me to understand what I'm sharing with you is making sense. Yeah? So those are the 3 requests that I have on this broadcast. So now let's get into the content. So today's topic is all about exploring what is racial grief, and this is part 1. We're going to have part 2 tomorrow. I'm going to be going into today's all about racial grief from the context of internally, what happens to us internally, and tomorrow I'm going to be talking about more externally in terms of living under the system of racism. I'm going to be talking more specifically about that, but for today it's more about how it impacts you personally. which is important. So my intention is just to help you, just to give you some guidance as to how to explore it, and how important it is to actually have a process of being able to deal with your grief once you've actually identified for yourself, how it manifests. So I think the important thing to start off with is to say out loud as well that, a lot of times we talk about grief in the context of losing a loved one, of losing somebody, of death. And I think it's important to say, especially in this cultural context, that grief is not just about that. It's about loss as well. It's about, losing. It can be losing. Basically, grief is about, in the context when it's not about bereavement, it's a combination of thoughts, feelings, behaviours, all of that sort of stuff that's connected to the loss of something that's of value to you. Yeah? Grief is about the feelings, thoughts and behaviours around something that you've lost that you found really valuable. So it could be a relationship, it could be a loved one, it could be a job, it could be you've moved house, it could be anything that you find valuable. That is a loss, and there is going to be, whether it's conscious or unconscious, there's going to be a grief process around that. So what I wanted to share today is 5 things that, as black people, as people of colour, that we've lost under the system of racism, that it's important for us to acknowledge. So the first thing, which is really massive, is our loss of self. We've lost our identity under the system of racism. Over the hundreds of years that white supremacy has been on the planet, destroying people, places and things in order to maintain their dominance, we've lost our sense of self, we've lost our sense of identity. And a lot of us don't understand who we are. We don't know who we are because we've had to abandon ourselves. And this is where the codependency and stuff has come in and into our lives. We've lost that ourselves because, in order to give us some sort of sense of safety, I think, in a way, it's like a survival thing. We've had to abandon ourselves, abandon our identity, abandon our culture and all that kind of stuff in order to create some sort of level of safety so that we can be in the world. We've had to create a sense of safety so that we can sort of live under this system from some sort of level of, so we can survive. It's a survival thing, but the fallout of that is that, a lot of us are kind of riddled with codependency, and codependency basically is a chronic form of self-abandonment. It's us not feeling comfortable being ourselves, and so, or it's not safe to be ourselves. It's not safe to be ourselves in the world. So we've had to, use techniques or different ways of abandoning ourselves to kind of make ourselves feel more comfortable in society. So that could be, it could be something as simple as, with the way that we do it, whether we do hair. And I'm not saying that everybody that relaxes their hair or whatever is kind of abandoning themselves, but for some of us it is that. We do it because we feel more comfortable and we don't want to go into work or whatever with our natural hair because it feels uncomfortable for us. We've learned to reject ourselves. We've learned to abandon who we are, abandon our, what God gave us, because, society tells us that we have to be a certain way in order to be accepted. So we've lost ourself. We've lost our sense of self, and what was our culture, we're made to feel ashamed of it. So in order to reclaim ourselves, that sense of loss, and I think let me say this as well, when we talk about grief as well, I think it's important to not just think about what we've lost, but also it's about thinking about what could have been, the loss of what should have been but wasn't, because we were never allowed to. We were never allowed to be ourselves in the first place, and that's one of the reasons why reclaiming ourselves is quite a difficult, can be quite a difficult thing, and it's actually a process that has to be done very delicately and consistently, because we're still constantly being told, that black is ugly, that black is this and that and the other. There's still loads of anti-blackness around the place, so we have to resist that. We have to work against that resistance, which actually can be quite painful. And because we were never really allowed to build our sense of self in the first place, especially if you were raised in a home that was anti-black, if you were raised in a home where your parents didn't really talk about it, it wasn't necessarily a conscious thing that there was anti-blackness or whatever, but when racism gets internalized, that's how it shows up. That's how it shows up. There's not a lot of cultural affirmation in the home. If that doesn't happen, then our sense of identity is going to be eroded, and it's going to be very difficult for us to have us to feel like we have a sense of self, that we feel grounded in our sense of self, because it wasn't modeled for us by our parents in our homes. So that loss of self is something that needs to be explored, and that needs to be done in a very delicate way. I'm going to sneeze again. Oh, excuse me, the pollen this week. Oh, excuse me, the pollen. The pollen this week. I was sneezing yesterday as well. Anyway, so so it's just really interesting. It's really, really interesting. We need to remember that it's not just all, the stuff that we've lost as ourselves. It's stuff that should have been, that just wasn't there. So we have to grieve the loss of those things as well. So loss of self is a huge one. It's a huge one, but it's something that I've learned over the years that takes time, because that first of all, being able to show up as myself as a black woman, being able to express myself through adornment, through language, through food and all of that kind of stuff. It can be, initially it was quite a painful process, because I realised that I was having to resist racism. I was having to step out of something that I was used to, and there was almost like a withdrawal process that I was going through, kind of letting go of that, that people-pleasing, codependent stuff around conforming to whiteness and all of that kind of stuff. There was a withdrawal process that had to go with that. But the result of it is that I just feel more at peace within myself. I feel more at peace within myself because, and I'm still exploring, I'm by no means kind of like cured or recovered or whatever it is. It's an ongoing process. And I think as long as the system of racism is rampant on this planet, there's always going to be questions that I'm going to be asking myself. Why am I doing that? What's the intention behind it? Am I doing it out of fear? Am I silencing myself? All of that stuff, because, the way that the system operates and how we absorb it, the enabling of the system is very insidious. So it's important to keep having those conversations, and to also the fact that I'm continuing to talk to other black people about this stuff, talking to my therapist about it and all of that kind of stuff. It just helps to keep me anchored in my sense of self. So I think loss of self is such a huge topic. It's such a huge thing. And it's something that we are going to be talking a lot more about on Saturday at the book club, obviously, because we're going to be talking specifically about racial grief. So it's going to be interesting to hear what people have to say about that, especially around the topic of loss of self, because it's such a huge one. And also the loss of self thing is kind of linked to our self-esteem. It's linked to, I think, why so many of us have such low self-esteem, because there's nothing there for us to anchor in our sense of identity, so I think that's a huge part of it. That's a huge part of it as well. So number one, loss of self is a really big one. The second loss around racial grief is our spirituality, and I say that because our spirituality is really is a huge part of a connection to around who we really are. Because we talk about a lot of this in recovery, actually, around, we're spiritual beings having a human experience. So if we're disconnected from our spirituality, we're disconnected from that huge ocean of greatness, then, we're doing ourselves a disservice, and we're not going to show up as human beings in our best possible way if we're disconnected from our spirituality, because our spirituality is part of who we are as human beings, and I think that's one of the reasons why white supremacy is so savage when it comes to the oppression and stuff like that, because they don't want us to recognize that we have that our spirituality is a huge part of who we are, and that they don't want us to think that we're divine, that we're precious, that we're part of that godlike existence, And another way that that we've lost our spirituality as well is by, shoving the images of white Jesus down our throats. If they keep telling us that, or showing us all these images of God, or however you define it. Hi, thanks for joining. If we keep seeing all these images of our higher power, God, however you want to describe it, as a white man in the clouds, that's external from us, and we've been taught to kind of look up to this image, then again, it kind of erodes our self-esteem, it erodes our sense of self, and again, it disconnects us from the fact that we are spiritual human beings, and our ancestors, we have to remember that on the plantations and stuff, our ancestors were not allowed to practice their spirituality. So again, that's another loss. That's another loss that again disconnects us from our identity. It disconnects us from ourselves. It disconnects us from who we are as black people. So giving ourselves permission to start exploring spirituality and to name our own, build a relationship with our own higher power internally, because we are a cup of God. Our higher power is not separate. It's not separate. We've been taught that it's separate. I remember being taught that as a child. It was God is over there. Like God is some sort of separate thing, and it's not. I firmly believe that it's not a separate thing. It's an internal thing, and it's about connecting to the God or higher power that's within us. It's within our higher self, and I think, the minute that I started to relate to my higher power from that context, I had a lot more respect for myself. I had a lot more respect for my body. I had a lot more respect for nature. I had a lot more respect in general, because I didn't see myself as some sort of wretched human being. I was able to see myself as a divine being, and one of the ways that I deal with the loss of my spirituality and all of that kind of stuff is giving myself permission to explore the values around spirituality that maybe I just don't identify with. I did not. I mean, my parents were devout Pentecostals or whatever, so I was used to images of white Jesus around the house, and obviously we went to church and stuff on Saturdays and stuff like that. But I realised through exploring my own relationship with my spirituality that image, that whole concept of Christianity, and this is just my personal opinion, it's not disrespecting anybody else who's a Christian, my personal view is that I can't connect with that because of the history around Christianity, and the fact that a lot of our ancestors were abused, and the fact that Christianity is still used very much to pacify black people into not being empowered and showing up for ourselves under the system of racism and stuff like that, and the fact that there's been no amends at all from the powers that be under the Christian church or whatever, or any of these religions that have, that they enslaved us as well. A lot of these people had, they enslaved us enslaved our ancestors, and we're still being enslaved emotionally. We're still being enslaved psychologically today. So I just can't connect with it, and that there's been no amends made or anything from any of these religious organisations that have been involved in our oppression or enslaving us. There's been no amends at all. So I can't. For me personally, I cannot connect with that. I can't connect with that, and I cannot willingly engage in a practice that has played such a huge part in my oppression, and without any sort of amends or anything. I just can't do it. So that's how kind of I dealt with the grief around that stuff. And at the minute I'm sort of just exploring African spirituality and just my own connection with that, and I choose at the moment to do it through meditation, being out in nature and stuff like that, because all of that stuff I just feel closer to my higher power when I'm out in nature and when I meditate and all of that kind of stuff. And I find if I have a lot of images and stuff around my house and stuff now that it's African deities and stuff like that, because that's how I connect to my higher power. I need to see those images. To connect with my spirituality as myself, So, Yeah, I think having that conversation around spirituality and loss is really, really important, because it's connected to our sense of self. It's connected to our higher self, you know. So, and I think there is a lot of, I think the reason why so many of us find it difficult to have those conversations with ourselves is because, you know, and this is my experience, but there's always a lot of shaming around it. You know, it's another reason why I struggled with Christianity, because I found it very shaming. And that, you know, their belief that their way is the only way, and if you don't do that way, you're going to burn in hell and all that kind of stuff. It's very shaming. And so anybody that chooses to explore spirituality from an African perspective or whatever, you know, I've seen it on social media that people are getting shamed for it, and what you doing all that voodoo and all that sort of stuff. And again, I think that's internalized racism, that's anti-blackness and all the rest of it, you know. And I think that it's important that we really give ourselves permission to look at these values and ask yourself, are you just taking on these spiritual values because it was what was taught to you? Are you making a conscious decision? Are you making a conscious choice to choose that way to practice your spirituality, or is it something that was passed down to you? I mean, if you've experienced that for you and it works for you, then that's fine. Practice that, you know, it's all good. But I think there are a lot of us that are just doing it because it's what our parents did, or we think that something's going to happen to us. You know, for years I was thinking I'm going to burn in hell because I just don't get it. I don't get it. Why are you thinking it's, you know, worshipping this version of white Jesus? I just didn't get it. But now I understand that my spirituality is the personal relationship that I have with my higher power, and it's got nothing to do with anybody else. And I will not be shamed or, you know, emotionally bullied into thinking that any other type of religion or whatever is the only way, and somehow something's going to happen to me because I don't practice it. If you want to, that's what your thing is, then good. I'm pleased for you, but you don't have the right to emotionally abuse other people because they don't practice what you practice. That's it. You know, so the whole conversation around loss is not just looking at what's been taken from us as black people in terms of our spirituality, but also, you know, how it plays out in the community around loss, you know, and just giving yourself permission to explore it and have those conversations, you know. So that's number 2. Number 3 is, you know, loss of our family unit, loss of the black family. This is such a huge topic, but not only, you know, have we as black people, and, you know, in terms of our ancestors, we lost family members and stuff like that. We physically lost them, but also with the trauma that's been passed down, through our families, we've actually lost the ability to connect with each other. We've lost the ability to have healthy relationships. We've lost the ability to raise our children with compassion. You know, I can't believe in 2019 that we're still having conversations about why hitting children is not appropriate. There was a conversation that I was having last week with somebody about it, and I'm just like, it's so painful to have these conversations, because not that I'm judging the people that are trying to justify it, but I felt so sad, because that to me just shows the level of trauma that's still in our communities, that's still recycling itself in our families, because that's the only reason it's being justified. It's the denial around keeping that alive. The denial around keeping that alive and trying to justify that is just, for me, it's an expression of trauma that's still embedded in our culture, that's still embedded in our families, you know, and that just makes me so sad, and it's so painful. And I've had, you know, I make the decision now to not have those conversations, to not engage in those conversations with people. I have got a few resources and stuff that I have, and I share the resources that I have around it. I wrote a piece for Dr. Stacey Patton's website a year or so ago, I think it's maybe a couple of years now, where I talk about the reasons why we still justify it. So I share that with people. I have a podcast as well that I shared some things on the podcast about it. I share that with people. But for my own mental health, you know, it's exhausting trying to keep having these conversations with people around it. And I think that we've lost so much already as a community under the system of racism. And I think to lose our relationships through this practice of this horrible practice of raising our children, thinking it's okay to hit them, as a form of quote unquote discipline, which it isn't, is painful, and the loss is going to continue because you're denying your child, we're denying ourselves quality, healthy, loving, trusting relationships with our children and with our communities through carrying on this practice. So, the loss in this case is not just the physical loss of our ancestors and the grief that is being passed down through them, through the generations, but also the loss of relationship that we're able to have with our families because of the recycled racism that's still being played out in our homes and in our communities. And I think, I could do, 10, 15, I could do so many different live streams on this topic. And I have done quite a lot in the past and will continue to do them because it's a huge topic. But I think in this context of loss, I think it's really important that we just sit and marinate on that for a minute around the loss of relationship and how, that has impacted us. How does it impact you? One of the things that I'm going to be doing with the with my mentees on Saturday at the book club around loss is, giving them a series of, because I get heart work, what I call heart work, which is homework, is give them a series of questions specifically around grief, not just how they feel about the grief, but actually giving them the opportunity to actually process it, to begin to really have honest conversations. And there's going to be about things that maybe they hadn't looked at, especially around the whole racial grief conversation, because we do normally talk about it in the context of bereavement, as in losing somebody physically. But I think having this conversation around racial grief and the whole concept of what we've lost as a community from a cultural context, it's important because there are feelings underneath that, and there are going to be ways that it impacts how we show up in our relationships, how we show up in the world. These losses are going to have an impact on us, whether we realise it or not. These cultural losses are going to have an impact on us as Black people, how we show up in the world. So to be able to have these sorts of conversations is really, really important. And the last one, number 4, is about, it's kind of linked to what I was saying before about family, but loss of community. Loss of community. I was recently reading an article around grief, and one of the suggestions that the lady was talking about was, to build community, and she was talking about, it's important to listen to your elders and all of this kind of stuff. And it made me really sad to read it because, one of the things that I hear over and over and over again from people that I work with, from mentees and whatever, is that trust has been broken. That trust has been broken, and a lot of our elders have not earned the trust. They've not earned that respect because, a lot of them have never dealt with a lot of their own trauma, so they're not in a position to be able to help us. They're not in a position to be able to help the youth. They're not in a position to be able to support their children because they're trapped in their own trauma, or they're still hitting their children, or they think it's okay. So, that whole thing around, you should listen to your elders, I think needs to be taken with a pinch of salt in a way, because before you can even think about it's okay to listen to your elders, are the elders that are in your circle even safe? That's the conversation that you need to be having first and foremost. Before you can start talking about listen to your elders, you need to ask yourself the question, are your elders safe to have that conversation with in the first place? Or anybody in your circle for that matter. Because internalized racism and this whole thing around grief is something that is so powerful and so insidious. And this is one of the things that's keeping us from healing, I believe. It's actually, I'm learning more and more that it's less about what white supremacy is doing, and more about the relationship that we have with ourselves and the relationship that we have with each other. That to me, and just from my experience and just from working with people, those types of things are the most devastating ways that our community remains broken. Because we there's no unity, there's no strength within us, within our families and stuff, because the trust is broken and people struggle to have those conversations, and there's not enough people in those families or whatever that are doing the healing work. So therefore the families remain broken, and then they end up just passing the stuff on to their children, and the trauma just gets recycled. That's how it works. And then because nobody's grieving this stuff, nobody's having the conversations about racial grief, or personal grief or bereavement, or what, because we don't understand it in that context. That stuff just gets passed on. And we have to be willing to start having these conversations. You know, we have to start being willing to have this conversation. This is one of the key reasons why I created this self-love rehab course, because in order to start doing this work, in order to create a process that is going to support you on a daily basis, you've got to remember that as long as we're living under the system of racism, this whole process of racial grief and the healing process that needs to happen is cyclical. As long as we're living on the system of racism, there's always going to be loss. There's always going to be loss at some level. Whether you're related to the person, or whether it's a loss in terms of yourself, or what, there's always going to be that context going on under the system of racism, because racism feeds on our disconnection, on our loss. Racism is built on black loss of self, loss of people, loss of relationship, loss of love, loss of connection. It feeds on loss. So if we are not processing that loss and doing the internal work in order to create connection and empowerment, we're going to be in a perpetual, continuous state of unresolved grief, and that is just going to generate anger. It's going to feed this. It just goes on and on and on. You know, and the self-love rehab course that I'm going to be doing in July is about taking the first baby steps. It's about setting up the foundational tools that you need to start to build your self-esteem, to start to build your self-confidence, so that you can start to rebuild in relationships, to start to build a family of choice. Maybe your family are not ready. Just because you're ready to do the healing work, it doesn't mean your family are ready. And like I was saying before, maybe your elders are still trapped in their own stuff, and they can't do this work, because not everybody can do this work. Which means that it's important for you to have a family of choice. You've got to start building your healing community, because otherwise you can't do this stuff by yourself. You can't do this stuff by yourself. I know there's a lot of you out there that think you can, but you can't. It's a we conversation. It's not an I conversation. It's a we conversation. We need to heal as a community, and in order to heal as a community, you need a safe space to start doing that. So if you are stuck, and you really want to start doing the cultural healing work, you want to start to learn how to love yourself, you want to start to learn how to build confidence, come to the self-love rehab. Click the link in the bio, go to heal.juneallen.net. That's heal.juneallen.net. That's heal.juneallen.net. You'll find all of the details there. Come and be held. Come and experience a compassionate space for you to be able to share your truth, do the work with other women that are doing the work, and to just and stay accountable as well. Stay accountable with each other. It's not about being perfect. It's about, empowering each other to just keep going, and inspiring each other to just keep going. So important. That's it for today. Thank you so much for joining me. If you know somebody who would benefit from this broadcast, please share it with them. If there's anything that I've shared today that you found really helpful, drop a link in the comments or send me a direct message if you'd like to. Again, if there's anything that I've spoken about today that you found useful, and you would like to join us maybe for the book club on Saturday, or for the trip in Ghana, or for self-love rehab on the 12th of July, go to heal.juneallen.net. That's heal.juneallen.net. That's heal.juneallen.net. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you tomorrow for part 2. All right, take care. Bye bye.